Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility, episode 524. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005 through this medium. And today I am chatting with you about MLK Day of Service. Okay, just basically MLK Day in general, because this is going to land on MLK Day in the US. And then also it happens to be Inauguration Week. So it's a big week here in Washington, D.C. And really, I like to think around the globe. And so I want to share some ideas for celebrating MLK Day and Inauguration Day. So grab a pen, planner, and a journal to follow along with me. And a reminder that you can find a link to this podcast show notes at kimberlywilson.com/524. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, Overcast. I've got a link to all of these in the show notes, and whatever you're listening through, just hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Also, a gentle reminder, we have a podcast app for iPhones and Androids, so you can always have Tranquility to go and all these past episodes over the many years with you as you are out and about. And those of you who are new to Tranquility du Jour, a huge welcome. Delighted to have you here. And you can find out more about Tranquility du Jour at kimberlywilson.com/new. All right, so let's start with MLK Day and ways to celebrate and honor and acknowledge. You know, one of the things in last week's Love Note, which you can find out more about or sign up for at kimberlywilson.com/love notes, I shared what was going on in my life on January 6, 2021, when insurrectionists stormed the Capitol. Okay. And, it's interesting. I'm like, am I about a mile from the Capitol? I Googled it and I'm actually about 3 miles. So, honestly, I felt quite safe, but it was one of those things where you're just like, your jaw just drops. You can't believe what you are seeing unfold. And what's interesting, as I wrote about in this blog post and in the Love Note, is I had a 1 hour break between clients. Wednesdays tend to be my really busy day. And I had this 1 hour break between 1:30 and 2:30 Eastern time. And of course, that's when everything went down. So I'm like watching them enter the Capitol and shocked because it's like in the freaking rotunda where, John Lewis and RBG laid in state last year, these just amazing beings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are coming through with Confederate flags, with like all sorts of just disgusting paraphernalia. So horrified, right? And then it was time to put on my therapist hat and meet my 2:30 client. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, I just have to shut off this horror show and go right into being fully present with the being in front of me on the screen in front of me, of course, because we're virtual. So what's interesting about that, and the reason I share that is it's like, okay, how do we from time to time switch off the chaos and the craziness? Because if we sit there and watch the whole thing unfold, which you know how breaking news is, it's like we don't really know what's happening. And so we're just watching like repeats as people are speculating. And then later, of course, everything's come out and it's like even worse than we thought it was going to be. And so what was nice is I had something to pull me away, because otherwise I think like many people, I would have just sat in front of the TV, the breaking news, and just watched it unfold in horror. And what was wild was just noticing my body during all of this. Like I just felt the adrenaline kind of running through my veins. I felt like my heart was racing. I was like a little sweaty. I was like, oh my God, it's just amazing. The cortisol, right? The stress response that our body has at that time. And, as I had to switch on to my therapist hat at 2:30 when I knew that they had entered. And I think at that point, maybe there was a standoff, or the standoff was about to happen where they were getting into the lawmakers' kind of big room. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so in that moment, I was like, okay, what can I do to like really ground and calm myself? This is where the practices of tranquility can really, really make a difference, right? So it's like, okay, ground yourself, root yourself, and come into this freaking present moment so that you can be present with the person in front of you. And that was my focus. I will confess, after every session though, I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I would like log into CNN.com. And then I would go back, and then I was with clients until later that evening. And then, of course, too, at that time, my phone was blowing up with text messages because the mayor had implemented a 6 p.m. curfew. Well, I had clients until 7:30, and I'm like, I got to get my dog out. So it's just one of those things where it's just like, just a domino effect where so many things are unfolding. Okay, well, how does this tie into MLK Day? Well, one of the things that I've just kind of been sitting with since this happened on the 6th is like, okay, like, how do I process this? The fact that too, Washington, D.C. is filled with like thousands of, military right now, just as we prepare for the inauguration. And so, it's just like, there's just so much, just intensity, right? And so one thing that I really love, of course, as we are approaching and in MLK Day is like this quote that I think is so powerful. Of course, he has many phenomenal quotes, but this one really stuck with me. And I think that this can be helpful as we process January 6th, as we look ahead to January 20th and beyond. And it's life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I'm just like, it just hits me in the chest. I think that's so freaking powerful. And, and I think it's just a great reminder of like, so often we can feel like, oh, I'm too small. I can't make a difference. What can I possibly do? Like, this is so big. It is so big. It is so big. And yet we have the power to make a difference, even if it's a small thing. It's funny is often I would always say like, oh, well, smiling at a stranger or things along those lines. And now you kind of can't under the mask, but I do notice like I'm still smiling, and you can kind of tell that people like their eyes squint, right? Because their cheeks lift. And so you're like, oh, they are smiling, or, I'm still smiling. But, it's crazy. That might seem like a little thing, but I happen to think it makes a really big difference. And I definitely notice that I feel it if I'm out walking my dog and, it's just one of those days where it seems like everything's going wrong. And if a stranger in Washington, D.C. says hello or smiles at me or, acknowledges Gizmo or any of my other pups, it's like it feels good. So again, what are you doing for others? So what I love is that MLK Day is now really kind of thought of as a day of service. There's even an MLK Day of Service website, and I've linked to that in my show notes. Also, there was a wonderful article that came out over the weekend. CNN, how to serve on MLK Day while isolating at home. And they gave quite a few ideas. Now, many I went ahead and wrote about in my blog post. So I'm just going to share a few things from this post that I thought might be helpful as you two think about, okay, how can I make a difference in some small way? And again, I know that we all want to change the world in some capacity. And I like to think that we are, right? The butterfly effect, all of that. And yet, how can we start from a micro level also? And that means, you fall into this others also. So are you being kind and gentle with yourself? What about kind of your family, the people that you live with or you share space with, the other beings in that area? Then taking it, into kind of like larger, the local community, the larger community, right? And then we get more into the macro. But, thinking about within our small concentric circle, what can we do to make a difference? So I have some ideas and I would love to hear yours. So drop me a note, hello@KimberlyWilson.com, and let me know what you think whenever this quote comes to mind. So I have here, reach out to someone. Send a snail mail love note. I'm loving these right now. I've gotten, about 50 to, think I've gotten about 70 actually, Valentine's postcards that have glitter on them. Cavallini is the brand, and I just love them. And anyway, so I'm going through and I'm writing all these Valentine's Day postcards to send to people. And, it's a little thing. When all said and done, it costs like $1.50 each, right? Because the postcard's $1.50 for postage-ish, right? But it's like a little tiny thing that I hope to think if I got one of these sparkly postcards in the mail, I would be delighted. And so my hope is that this will help delight others and make a difference in some small way. What are you doing for others? Of course, volunteering, teaching, sharing your gifts and your skills. Helping stock a food bank. Oh my gosh. People are so in need right now with everything going on in the world. Get involved. Foster, adopt, or sponsor an animal. Deliver meals. I know people who are doing meal delivery to people in Washington, D.C. in need, elders who can't leave their home. I just think it's such a really kind of sweet gesture. And of course, you can wear your mask. You're in your own car. It can feel quite safe for some. Post something inspiring on social media, right? There's so much, I think, negativity just because it's been, let's be honest, it's been hard. It's been a hard 4 years. And it's been, in particular, I think, last year, quite hard. So we're struggling. And so what can you do to help spread kindness and love beyond your home? Donate. And of course, that can be donate time, money, goods. So the article that I mentioned, and again, I'll have a link to it in the show notes, the CNN article on how to be of service while isolating at home. Now, she mentions building and sending care packages, which are so fun to do. And again, they can be small, okay, I mentioned my little postcard, but you could do a very small, even a note card and stuff a few things inside, a tea bag, maybe an article you think someone would like. And again, these don't have to be large gestures, but they mean a lot to the people who receive them. Participating in teaching and learning opportunities, the author mentions, donating blood or bone marrow, giving companionship, being a listening ear, and commemorating MLK's legacy. So I went over to the King Center and found that they have a holiday event happening. And there's a link to that also in the show notes that goes to this blog post. And that's another wonderful way. And there's going to be a lot probably on Monday where you can participate and dive in and feel like you're a part of what is happening. Of course, there's a beautiful MLK Memorial in Washington, D.C. There's the African American Museum, which I don't know if it's open right now, but when you are in Washington, D.C. again, and if you have not been there, it is freaking found. So I've done the bottom level, which is just a heartbreaking level, right? It's a lot about slavery. And then you come out and, you're not prepared for this, but you're moved into the next area is this contemplation room of sorts that has this, beautiful waterfall and a gorgeous MLK quote. And it's just I get teary even just thinking about it. It's such a religious experience, And so if you haven't done that, I highly recommend getting to that museum and going through that experience. It's truly phenomenal. And they have a wonderful cafeteria downstairs. We can get all sorts of wonderful food from different regions, around the U.S. It's just that was a really fun piece also. Offer support to others. What can you do? Do you have a neighbor who is homebound and needs some groceries? What are some small gestures? And be gentle with yourself and others. Know that everyone is struggling a bit right now. The other piece that I mentioned in this blog post that I just want to share with you because I think this is so important is remember, put on your own oxygen mask first. So we cannot be of service if we are showing up depleted. Okay, so those are my ideas for celebrating and commemorating MLK on MLK Day, of course, and beyond. And really asking yourself, what am I doing for others? All right, so let's talk about Inauguration Day. So, the wonderful thing is there is so much out there on Inauguration Day that you can find with regard to, of course, the swearing ins at noon, and there's going to be an amazing concert in the evening. And, there's a lighting ceremony happening at Lincoln Memorial the night before at 5:30 p.m. So, there's a lot of wonderful things happening. Again, you can find all this online. But what I wanted to share with you, because I know a lot of people have it off, I'll be seeing clients because it's a Wednesday and it's going to be a fairly busy day for me. But what I wanted to, but I have kept it free until 2:30 because I must see this swearing in. And I have to tell you, the day, I remember I was doing ballet. It was a Saturday. It was an 11 a.m. class. So maybe it was around 11:15-ish Eastern time that Biden was declared the winner. And I tell you, I squeal. I was so happy. I'm like texting everybody. I took a photo of it on the television. I was like over the moon. And I hate to say it was one of the happiest days of my life, but it may have been. I did not want the day to end. I remember staying up. I watched the SNL that night. It's like I didn't want to go to bed because I didn't want the day to be over. It was such a joyful, joyful day for me. And I think for many of you potentially. So, the thing about this win is it means so much in our ability, I think, to get back to a sense of normalcy and, respect within the globe and respect for ourselves as Americans. I mean, there's so many positives, right? And not to say no one is perfect. But this is a big freaking day. And so, what's interesting is initially we were like, well, we must be in DC on the 20th because we want to go down there and be numbers and support. Well, of course, that's all changed now. And now I will be supporting from afar. But, I think back, what was it, 2008 when, of course, Obama won. And then it was 2009 when he was sworn in. And we got to go to an inaugural ball that night. And that was like, such a highlight. Someone who was a yogi at the studio was just like, hey, I have 2 tickets and I can't go tonight. Do you want them? I'm like, oh my God, do I want them? So, it's fun because we've gotten to experience that, but I assume there's not going to be inaugural balls. I don't know, this year, kind of with COVID and everything going on. However, those of you who are like, well, I've got the day off. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. There's only so much of the television or like the, kind of the unfolding of it all that I want to watch. You got to watch it at noon. And then also, I think it's at 8:30 that night is the concert, which seems amazing. Lots of really phenomenal musicians and artists will be sharing their art and their talents. But for those of you who are like, what do I do during the day? I've got the day off and I'm not really sure. I wanted to share some tips that I have pulled together over the years for what to do on election night. Right? Because election night, it's funny, I couldn't even see clients on election day this year. I just had to move everyone. I was so anxious. And it was also one of those things where I just think we were all just like glued to the television or just glued to like what is happening. Like, what can we do? What can we do to try to bring about like good juju, right? And so, that it's a very anxiety producing experience. Well, Inauguration Day, hopefully is not going to be that sort of thing because we already have a winner. But I wanted to provide some ideas, and I've got a link to this also in the show notes of just like, okay, what can we do during that day to nourish our souls and also nourish others? And keep in mind that MLK quote of like, okay, what am I doing for others? Okay, so I've got some ideas. And again, there is a link in the show notes, which you can find at kimberlywilson.com/524. Okay, one I've got is walk your dog, okay, or walk somebody else's dog. Write a love letter to Susan B. Anthony, Alice Paul. I've got all sorts of like people here. Paint your nails red. Soak in a lavender-infused bubble bath. Wear a pantsuit. Order in your favorite meal. Support local, right? As I was in Washington, D.C. Over the weekend, and we were ordering like all sorts of our favorite kind of local places. We're like, well, got to support local. It's like, meanwhile, I could also make myself a salad at home, but I was like, got to support local. So, is there like a favorite meal that would just be decadent to you on Inauguration Day? Go for a run, pour a glass or two of bubbly, do yoga. dance to their playlist. And I've got a link to their playlist, and it's amazing. It's got like Hall & Oates, Tribe Called Quest, Bruce Springsteen, all sorts of really great artists. So dance along to that. Dress in white to honor the suffragettes. Bake vegan cupcakes and top with red, white, and blue sprinkles. Listen to classical music. Make a list of gratitude. Write a thank you to an elected official. Get involved with the Women's March, and I've got a link, of course, to that. Read about women's history. Watch Mrs. America or RBG, two really amazing films. And of course, I have those linked also in this blog post, which you'll find in the show notes. So those are just some ideas. If you're like, I kind of want to acknowledge like Inauguration Day. I wanted to be there. I can't be there. What can I do having this day off, but still like feeling as if I'm contributing to myself and others and kind of the higher purpose of this like freaking phenomenal day. All right. So I hope this is helpful as you think about MLK Day and Inauguration Day this week. The other thing I wanted to mention is I would love to hear from you on what topics you'd like me to muse upon. Now, you may recall 2 weeks ago in my podcast, which was episode 522, when I did my year in review, I mentioned that every other week, this is my plan as of now, is I will do a piece where I kind of muse on a topic. And, oftentimes it'll be related maybe to something that's going on, like right now. Or, maybe something along the lines of like skincare. I've gotten a request about that, aging, plant-based living, all sorts of things, right? So what I would love to know though, is there something that you're like, I really want you to talk about X or share a bit more about Y? I would love to know that because I would love to make that happen for you, my beloved, loved listener. All right. And you can just let me know by sending a little note to hello@KimberlyWilson.com or, of course, posting in the comment section of wherever you are finding this. All right. Finally, just a reminder to join TDJ Insider's Facebook group where we have been reading along and together. And this month was Tina Turner's Happiness Becomes You, which I just finished. And over in our private Facebook group, the TDJ Insiders Facebook group, I shared some of my favorite passages. You can find that. And also there's, of course, a link to my 6 books and my planner if you're looking to find a bit more tranquility in the way you plan. Lots of great ideas and systems out there for that. Link in the show notes. Follow along. Of course, I'm on Instagram, love the gram, and also YouTube. And if you're looking for some really kind of classic, yummy, super soft, chic clothing that's locally made and eco-friendly, check out TDJ by Kimberly. And you can find a link to that in the show notes or just go to KimberlyWilson.com/TDJ. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have a moment to share a review of this podcast, would be super duper grateful. And in the interim, I wish you a beautiful MLK Day and a beautiful Inauguration Day and a delightful, delicious week ahead. Bye-bye.